Today I have another great guest, Marc from Polygon Labs.
I'm okay with Stripe doing incredibly well in stablecoins. I can do incredibly well in stablecoins too. Payments companies who are coming into the space are very limited from a geographic perspective. Stablecoins to me is like just one form of on-chain payments. I don't actually think we need things to improve right now. Money needs to move freely anywhere.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Wrap Up Podcast. Today I have another great guest, Marc from Polygon Labs. Marc, thank you for accepting my invitation to join this episode of Wrap Up Podcast, and great to have you here.
Hi Sam, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Right, first thing first, I would love to learn more about Polygon Labs. Could you briefly introduce the company itself and what problems you guys are solving?
Yeah, sure. So Polygon Labs is a company that was initially built to make blockchains very fast and cheap. And
Okay.
as time has evolved, what we've realized is that the best use case for moving money or moving anything around the world is really like money moving around the world, and blockchains
Okay.
are built very, very well for that. And so over time, we've kind of moved towards making Polygon really built for payments as kind of like the key focus. And that's why, today I think we've moved over, $2.3 trillion of stable coins on Polygon to date already.
Like, a quick question. Is that because of stable coins? Is that because of that hype? Or, I mean, did you see a real potential in payments? Because as you said, Polygon Labs was a type of company, blockchain scaling company. So when the question is, why focus more directly on payments now?
Yeah. So it was about 12 months ago that what we realized was that most blockchains were being built to do everything. It's like you do
Okay.
trading and you do payments and you do RBAs and you try to do everything. But the thing is that when you do that, you're not building to anything specific, right? So you're not like good at anything. You're like okay at everything. And so we went back and looked at what is it that we already have pretty good traction in, and that we have experience with, right? And payments was really that use case. So it was about 12 months ago that we said let's start focusing specifically on that use case. Now, when we look at like stablecoin volumes on Polygon, there's really like two main drivers. One is
Okay.
pure like actual payments use cases, the Revoluts, Deposit Pays, Flutterwave type use cases. And then the other one is still more on like the kind of trading type side. So Polymarket is built on Polygon,
Yeah.
and so a lot of like stablecoin volume gets driven by that. And so we see those as like the two main drivers of like those huge stablecoin volumes.
Right, I see. When you say payments, what do you mean in simple terms? Is it online checkout, cross-border payments, or stablecoin payments, or as you said, is it prediction markets? What is that exactly?
Yeah, I mean, in the simplest form, right? It's somebody wants to actually like transfer money to somebody else,
Okay.
right? So, you might describe that as like pay-ins and payouts just in general. And so, when I look at something like, Polymarket or Courtyard in like the Web3 categories, right? Like I consider, an actual payment for buying a position to be like a payment, a buying a, tokenized Pokemon card. That's a payment.
Right.
The send money. Then you go to like the traditional world, and it's I need to send money to my family. I need to move my treasury around the world. I need to pay a supplier. I need to pay a vendor. All of those
Correct.
kind of typical use cases. So I kind of view these both as being payments use cases. It's really I need to pay for something that I want to do, and
Okay.
um, that's kind of like the transfers that I'm looking for.
Mark, here's a quick question again. You started as a blockchain company. Are you planning to integrate more traditional rails? Let's say if it's in the US, like is it ACH, FedNow, and if you think about Europe, a few other channels, SEP, and etc. Or you will still keep focus on blockchain, but now, as you said, like more focus on payment use cases.
Yeah, so this is something that we think is a big differentiator. Is our perspective is you need to offer one vertically integrated solution. We're doing that through something that we call the open money stack, and it
Okay.
is kind of several layers. And
All
really, where
right.
this comes from is talking to customers, right? So we would talk to whether it's B2B to B use cases or B2B to C use cases. What we learned was that they were having this issue with understanding that stablecoins are good for money movement. They can see it. It's more
All
transparent,
right.
it's fast, it's cheaper. They knew that. But when they were having discussions on how do we actually use this, it started getting
Okay.
tricky because they started dealing with the idea that they needed to choose a blockchain like Polygon, but then they knew that they needed a wallet, which serves almost like as the online account for users. They then knew that they needed to give a way for users to get their money on the chain and off the chain. And then
Right.
they also knew that there were a lot of different chains and that they needed to be able to move the money between those chains in case their users wanted to. And so, we realized that just offering that one blockchain really didn't solve the problem well, and nobody was solving the problem. So we actually recently made two acquisitions. One's still in the progress of closing. One is of a company
Okay.
called Sequence, and the other one's of a company called Coinme. And they kind of complete the stack for us, right? So we've got, Polygon is the blockchain. Sequence brings in the wallet that we now have the ability to offer a wallet with the blockchain, which I kind of view as like the foundational pieces that you need.
Yeah.
Coin brings with it the ability to do transactions in 48 states with money transmitter licenses in most of those. And so now we're able to on ramp and off ramp. One of the cool things
Okay.
about Coin is it's not just like digital, like ACH, FedWire, FedNow, things like that. It's also physical cash on ramps, which
Okay.
is really good from like a remittance use case, especially when there's cash and you need to actually move that cash on chain. So that's the Coinbase part. And then on top of that, we have like what
Hmm.
we call the kind of like online orchestration or interop part, which is, a product that allows to go from, Polygon to, Arbitrum to Solana to anywhere else. And that's the kind of
Okay.
key idea of like the open money stack, right? It's
All right.
not just a vertically integrated stack that's like you are in the Polygon ecosystem and you can't do anything else. It's here's an open stack where you're in the Polygon ecosystem, but we understand that like money needs to move freely anywhere, both around the world, but also like within networks. And so we're going to enable that.
All right. I see. So, who are you building this for? Is it for crypto companies or fintechs, banks, or enterprise companies? Who are your ideal customers?
Yeah, so we really think about this kind of as an evolution. Right now, when we focus on like B2B to C is kind of like
Okay.
the main focus. And that's very quickly evolving into like B2B and B2B2B, right? So what are those use cases? We think about like fintechs and neobanks as like a key one, right? They want to offer
Right.
their users the ability to move money. And so they need wallets, they need on-ramps, they need a chain, all of that. We can hand them an API and
Okay.
plug that API in, and you can do all of those things. Same thing on like the B2B side, right? Especially from like a treasury movement or like vendor payment is, hey, I know I can do this better, not have capital locked up for, a week
Hmm.
as I move it around the world and actually know where my money is. So I'll just move this in, 2 seconds instead. That'd be the other one. And then the third broad use case would be like the B2B to B kind of use case where, you're really serving other businesses. And so
Okay.
within that, it kind of encompasses like the enterprises, the fintechs, banks to some degree, and then like marketplaces are the other like good one that ends up being like lots of money flowing from one place to the other in a very
Right.
global way.
Mark, look, from my experience, what I saw so far is that more traditional PSPs or payment service providers are moving towards rather, blockchain and building their own solutions on blockchain. One good example is Stripe. They are doing a lot. So here's the question. Look, I'm a fintech founder. Let's say I'm a fintech founder, and why should I go and use Polygon instead of Stripe, who already is in payments, and now they're adding like a lot of solutions, even and later on blockchain, stablecoin, basically everything. So if you could explain.
Yeah. So a few things on that. First, Stripe actually today does most of its volume on Polygon. So,
Okay.
I think this is very reflective of the fact that, I think this is true in the payments industry in general. There's a lot of
Right.
collaboration, right? You compete, but
Okay.
there's also opportunities to use each other's products where it makes a lot of sense, right? And I think that's a great
Mm.
example of it. I think second is when you're betting on the growth of like payments on chain, um, you're in a pretty good spot because what we're going to see over the next 10 years is
Okay.
so much growth that no one company can absorb it all. So like I'm okay with Stripe doing incredibly well in stablecoins. I can do incredibly well in stablecoins too. And the reality is like the growth of on-chain money is actually more important. Like if I could just like work with the other, 100 companies that are trying to do something similar in some way, and all we did was expand the size of like the stablecoin usage around the world, we'd all do incredibly well. Now, the third part is Polygon
Mm,
is especially well positioned because there's a lot of new blockchains that want to focus on payments. And new
right,
blockchains is really the important keyword here. Polygon's been around for over 5 years. As I said, like
right.
we have trillions of volume. We have on and off ramps all around the world, integrations all around the world. You want to make investments on chain? We already have RWAs on chain for you. So this is not like, hey, I need to take a bet on a new blockchain, which every new blockchain, by the way, is going to have to figure stuff out, right? It's going to break somewhere, it's
Absolutely.
going to have issues. And I think being somewhere tested, I think is important. The next thing would be that most payments companies who are coming into the space are very like limited from a geographic perspective, right? Because
Okay.
payments are like local and regional first in nature.
Yeah.
So when I look at it and I think of, any payments, almost any payments company out there, who has a bigger footprint, Polygon or them from a global perspective? And the answer is definitely Polygon. Like we
Okay.
have, the fintechs that are on blockchains
All right.
are almost all on Polygon, whether that's in LATAM, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the US. You'll always see Polygon being supported. And that's relationships that we have built up over like many years all around the world. And so that's something that's like very, very difficult to replicate. So ultimately, I think we're all going to like grow incredibly well together. But at the same time, we've built over many years like a very robust system and ecosystem that I think is very hard to replicate in the short term.
I see. So as you said, it's mostly like partnership, and both types of companies will, grow equally, as you said, because the volume is too high. So what makes Polygon suitable for payments? Is it lower cost, faster settlements, or global access? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everything, right? There's two different components of it. One is what are blockchains just good for, period, and then there's like what does
Okay.
Polygon do really well, right? Like all blockchains, especially in their current format, most blockchains they're global in nature, right? They're all permissionless. They all have they've gone decently cheap, not all as cheap, but decently cheap. They've gone decently fast. So like
Yeah.
all the blockchains are getting like to a point where they're converging. And by the way, that's why I think it's really important to build stuff on top of it that is value add that are actually needed for stablecoin movement. Now, when I think about like what makes Polygon unique just from a blockchain perspective alone,
Okay.
I do generally think is when we look at actual finality, so like when can you consider your transaction final, right? It's 2 seconds on Polygon. That is lower than what you find on any other blockchain. So you'll see a lot of blockchains talk about like their block times. So
Yeah.
like you can actually get a transaction through, but that's not actual like finality, which for payments you really want like actual finality. So that's one like differentiator. I think second is unique things that we're building around it. So things like confidential payments, right? This is going to be like incredibly important, especially the enterprises care about this a lot when it comes to like payouts involving like, whether it's creators or developers, things of that nature. I think when you think about like being able to offer like dedicated block space, this is like portions of the blockchain that can be used by like a specific enterprise where
Okay.
they're not competing to have their transactions included in a block like others. Things of that nature, I think, or like a stablecoin exchange system, because there's going to be hundreds of stablecoins, and being able to go between them flawlessly is really important. These are the
Right.
things that I think are unique that Polygon's been building that don't necessarily exist on like blockchains that are not built for payments specifically. I think
Okay.
FX would maybe be another one. There's 20 different currencies right now on Polygon that are not
All
just like
right.
US. So we have about 60 stable coins with 20 different currencies. And when you look at the liquidity in those stable
Okay.
coins, there's greater liquidity on Polygon in most of those than like the Japanese yen, the Brazilian real. Those are areas where like there's actually more liquidity than you see everywhere else. And I think that's why Polygon currently does something like 60% of all non-USD volumes in stablecoins.
I see. I see. You just mentioned one product that you guys are developing, which caught my attention: confidential payments. What do you mean? Could you please explain a bit in detail how that works?
Yeah. So I think there's, currently on blockchains, there's a benefit to this and a detriment, which is blockchains are transparent, right? So
Okay,
right now, if you make a payment to somebody, it's transparent. Now that's good in the sense that when you compare it to like the correspondent banking system, where
right.
you don't know where your money is at any point in time and you're wondering all the time. The nice thing with transparent payments is you can literally just go and look, where is my payment? Now, usually because it's done in 2 seconds, you don't need to go look, but you can see when it
Yep.
was finalized and what that actually looks like. That being said, when you're an enterprise and you want to pay out a bunch of like creators, for example, like that is a situation where creators don't want people to know how much they were paid,
Ah, I
right?
see.
And the enterprises feel like they need to be able to offer that. Even enterprises moving their own money, like they don't want people to know. So being able to like
Correct.
actually get that payout and people to not know the amount paid or even like the account that it was paid to or from is and ends up
Okay.
being like incredibly valuable. And that doesn't mean like every transaction needs to be like that. I think there's like a place for it, but people should have the option and companies should have the option to offer that
Yeah.
if they want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And but if I believe and if I understand correctly, if the regulator is required to disclose this information, it still could be, I mean, extracted and like seen, right? Correct?
Yeah, I mean that's how we think about it. Like from our perspective, it's all like this has to be done in a compliant way.
Yeah,
And so when we think of like confidential payments, like you need to be able to have a way of revealing information. But by default, it would be like private to the public, but then you can like reveal
sure.
information in
Got it.
private.
Makes sense. You talked a lot about stable coins and how they are becoming popular. So how important are they to your current strategy, to your payment strategy?
Yeah. So I think stablecoins to me is like just one form of on-chain payments. So I think stablecoins is the term that everybody knows and uses. But like from my perspective, I don't care whether it's stablecoins or tokenized deposits or something by some other name. Bottom line is money moving on a blockchain is a better form of money movements than moving on, off of blockchain. It's very
Yeah,
simple, right? You have a shared ledger and you move money on that shared ledger. It's going to move faster than when you need to pass, information between, two independent ledgers. And so,
correct.
from my perspective, I don't really care like what it's called. Generally, it's stable coins that people are transacting in. There's $300
Okay.
billion stable coins now that people are transacting in. So I think that's typically it. But I think what we will see is a growth in other areas. Like tokenized deposits is the one that stands out to me. Like
Yeah.
banks will tokenize their deposits, and there will be huge amounts of tokenized deposits that get transferred. And instead of needing to rely on like the correspondent banking network, they'll just be transferred like directly between different banks, for example. So I think that's another area that like doesn't get talked about as much because frankly it's not as big now, but it is going to be an area of significant growth in my opinion.
I believe so because recently I had a chat with Greg and they're launching tokenized deposits exactly for banks. And one thing that I was also wondering why everyone is discussing stablecoins, but no one is talking about the tokenized deposits because, in my opinion, again, and from what I read online, it's more, I mean, sort of like a secure and also basically tokenized deposits are backed by deposits that people hold in the bank. So I'm also curious, and I also believe it's going to be quite big very, very soon. And where do you see Polygon Labs? I mean, are you guys planning to be a settlement layer, or are you planning to be a platform where developers will be building on, or something else entirely?
Yeah, we think about it very much like a platform. So when we talk about like the open money stack being the way that we bring money on chain, our view is that this idea of like a complicated product that requires, integrations of many different pieces is not the way you grow. It's offering a platform that effectively is one API that you plug
Okay,
into, and now you get, access to a suite of services that you want. So you plug into this API and now you have the choice of saying, hey, I want to, pay people or receive payments. I want to spin up a new wallet. our view is, when you become a customer that actually starts using
Yeah.
the open money stack, you automatically get a wallet. It's your accounts. Like you automatically get an account, when you open up a fintech account or a bank, it should be the same thing, right? You automatically get a wallet. It's available to you now, and you can use that. And then you can decide what else you want to do. You should be able to start earning, through this API. So, we can plug in things like Morpho, and now you can like deposit and start earning on it, or you can invest, on chain to like an RWA. So you can like buy like, Apollo's like ACRE product or Biddle from BlackRock. Like you
Yeah.
should not have to move your money off chain to be able to do what
Okay.
you want with your money. And you should not need to integrate a bunch of additional like APIs to do it. All should be available through like this one platform called the Open Money Stack.
Okay, makes sense. And what needs to improve in blockchain for, I mean, say, payments on blockchain to feel like as seamless as Google Pay or Apple Pay or Visa card or Mastercard payments?
Honestly, I think we're there. Like, I don't actually think we need things to improve right now. Like, when I currently think about like the wallet that we have, it's an embedded wallet. You can use social logins to log in. You can put 2FA
Mm,
in front of it, and now you're literally just logging in. And when you log in, you can just see a balance. And when you want to transfer money, we don't need to have like a system that has like a bunch of pop-ups the way we do, right? You have these idea of like what we call like smart sessions, right? And it's the same thing on like your account. So for like when you first sign a transaction on your wallet, and by the way, it doesn't need to be like some pop-up. It's just sign your transaction the way you would pay. Just hit pay. And that is,
right.
signing your transaction. And you can agree that for the next like 30 days, you want to be able to continue to do that and not be able to like have to sign a new transaction every time, right? And so you would agree to that. And now you just have like a normal payments flow. So from my perspective, like nothing actually needs to improve when it comes to like the everyday like payment experience. There are things though that I think we need to do to like help make it easier and better.
Okay.
And actually on the back end more than anything else. So, if you're a company today,
Hmm.
you ideally would have a way to better do accounting of everything that is on chain, handle like taxes for everything that happens on chain. I think that to me is like that back end work is the most important thing that we need to be able to solve, because I actually think the user experience right now, while
Okay.
a lot of crypto is not good, there's no reason it needs to be that way. It can be like incredibly smooth and like not feel different from what exists today.
Mark, you said basically user experience is already at that level of, let's say, Apple Pay, Google Pay, and etc. Then why are we still using more fiat than crypto? Or even if we look at stablecoin payments, very recently I read an article by McKinsey. It's still very small portion of overall, I mean, global money movement. Why is that the case?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think there's a few parts of it. First is it is only recently that we got to this point of it being that good, right? Like I think
Right.
if you asked me this a year ago, I would not have said that like we are at a point where we're ready. I think that's
Right.
true today. Which, once you get to that point, now you're talking about like years of adoption to really catch up to where we are. I think second is you also have this like regulatory hurdle, right? Until the Genius Act being passed, there wasn't much stablecoin activity going on for like real world uses. There's a lot of like trading, but not a lot for like real world usage. And so to me, these two things coming together of like technically actually being ready, along with like the regulatory front being at a point where we can actually see that adoption in a comfortable way by businesses. Now we're actually like ready to do that. And to me, this is why when you look at charts, what you see is just like massive like exponential growth. And so I think that number when you go like 12, 24 months from now is going to
Yeah.
look just incredibly different. And we won't be asking ourselves that same question. It'll be more like, oh, so at what point was it that we started seeing that exponential growth, and why? And it'll, I think, clearly be because the tech was ready. And I think from a regulatory perspective, we got the clarity we needed.
Sure. Mark, do you think soon we will live in a world where blockchain runs in the background without us knowing it and transacting on it? Or do you believe we already live in that world and we are already like basically transacting on blockchain?
Yeah, this ties into the point that actually one of the points you made earlier around this idea of like why isn't it that we're seeing like more movement right now? And there's
Yeah.
this general idea of like um when when I think about where it is that like money movement needs to improve, it's probably two areas. It's cross-border money movement, and then it's in certain developing countries where you need
Okay.
to see like better money movement. I think if you were to tell somebody in the US, hey, you should use, a blockchain for money movement, would they just be like, Venmo works fine. Like, why do I need that? Right? Like,
True.
Zelle works
True.
fine. I don't need that. And that is an accurate statement. And so, like, my view is always like, we are not going to see adoption from those sources, and we shouldn't see adoption from those sources because there's no reason to. There's literally like there's small reasons, right? You could save the 2% on card fees or 3% on card fees, like,
Yeah.
but like usually to get like consumer changes, you need like 10x better, experiences than what you currently
Mm.
have, and there there isn't a 10x better experience to be had domestically. So my view is we see all the growth on cross-border payments and in certain like emerging countries. And then what happens in 5 years from now is you start seeing like domestic growth in like the US and in the EU. And the reason you'll see that is not because it's a better experience, but because I think if you're Venmo at that point, you start asking yourself, okay, I already have integrated a blockchain. These
Mm.
blockchains provide really good experiences. Why do I integrate this second system that actually just requires like more maintenance? Why don't I actually just use one system when I can create the same experience that I currently have? So
Makes
to
sense.
me, it'll be less about like it's a better experience and so we should move over. It'll be more just
Right.
from a convenience perspective. There's no reason to support like multiple different types of
I
networks in
see.
5 years from now, let's say.
I see. No, that's very helpful. Yeah, it's totally different perspective. Very interesting. And my last question, Mark, what would success look like for Polygon in 3 to 5 years from now on in payments?
Yeah, to me, it's all about volume, right? Like, what do payment volumes look like? And I think that for Polygon, like looking at how much volume is Polygon alone doing, I think is
Yeah.
not actually that useful. It goes to this point that I said earlier. To me, it's all about like how much payments in the world is happening on chain, and then we can look at like what portion of that will Polygon get. But from my perspective, if we can have like 10% of like global payments, like true
Right.
payments use cases actually happening in
Yeah.
3 to 5 years from now, I think that'd be good. Mostly because I think that's exponential. I think when you get to like 10% in year three, I think in 10 years from now you're talking about like 80%, right? And
Right.
so once you get to that, now you're talking about like quadrillions moving on chain, every year basically, and that starts becoming like very big numbers. And how
Sure.
Polygon's going to fare in that, I think, really comes down to the fact that we are going to offer like one very easy solution through the open money stack. That like all the feedback that we're getting right now from design partners is, wow, this
Okay.
is the thing that we've been waiting for. And so hopefully that turns out to be us getting a good portion of that pie of growth, and we'll
Sure.
see how that goes.
Yeah. I wish you all the success. And Mark, thank you for joining this episode of Wrap Up Podcast and looking forward to seeing more products from you guys.
Thanks, Sam. Really appreciate it. This was great.